Greetings, Earthlings. I am Robert Ogden, author of the memoir Eclipse of the Mourning Star. Welcome to Level 33, an hour with the 33 illustrators of the book Eclipse of the Mourning Star. Today's guest is the artist for Chapter 2, Innocent Tempest. Theophile Bondoux is a head of cinematography at DreamWorks Animation. His credits include The Bad Guys 2, Trolls 3, and Boss Baby 2. Theo is an avid rock climber, skateboarder, photographer, and very good friend of mine. Welcome to the show, Theo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, let's talk about your art in the book first. You're a photographer, and you used a specific camera to shoot that shot.
Yes, I've been taking photos for a long time, and I did, through the process, fell in love with Polaroid format, which was those instant photos. I love photography in general, but having some kind of a hard element in your hand is definitely something that I appreciate. Unfortunately, Fuji, that is producing the film, stopped producing the film years ago, but I did stash a little precious stack at home that I've been kind of carrying for years. And so for this project, I thought this would have been a good medium to try to capture the moment. And so this is a Mamiya Universal, is specifically the camera that we've used and the film is the black and white 3000 Fuji. So it's kind of an interesting medium where obviously you don't have too much of a right for a mistake. You have to,
as we discovered while shooting.
And so basically the box that I had was 10 pictures, so that was a good practice. We had 10 chances.
10 chances with a baby.
With a toddler, yes, which is definitely challenging, but it was fun. It was a
lot of fun.
The original idea, obviously, this chapter is a very personal chapter to you and from your youth. So obviously, I thought involving your own child now is kind of a great how do you call that? Mise en abîme in French, we would say, like kind of looping into itself, kind of like one layer of depth extra.
Yeah, it really kind of made the book for me because I was able to tie him in with that. And I think you were going to touch on the idea that I had originally, which was kind of a baby with a snow globe.
Yes. You came up with that, what you had in mind of a baby about to fall, I think, from a cliff, like with witnessing a storm within a globe within his hands. I'm not the best when it comes to drawing, so that's why for me my medium of choice that I feel more comfortable with was photography. But photography, then we had to kind of find something kind of feasible. I think the whole cliff and globes was maybe a little tricky, but in that same kind of concept, though, I think the witnessing the storm happening in front of you is something that I thought was achievable. So even though the original support is an actual Polaroid picture, I did end up editing on Photoshop to add the storm effects. Obviously, that was not in real life.
Although Hawk is a bit of a storm himself.
Yes, we had a storm for sure.
Yeah.
But we had a prop that was kind of a fun little thing. We had some kind of a illuminated globe, which kind of gave a cool lighting effects like that. Because it's a black and white film, we basically don't have too much of a choice in terms of, obviously, color-wise. It's black and white. We want it to be kind of high contrast. I was seeing it in high contrast in my mind, at least. And so by having a unique light source, just that globe in front of him, was kind of a great way to kind of create that nice little rim light silhouette, kind of something simple. At least that's the way I was thinking about it. You never know what you're gonna get. There is always a little bit of guesswork. But I think it did fulfill its goal, at least for me, and having that globe was a great way to both get the lighting I was looking for, and it was also a nice placeholder for the storm that we were gonna include eventually into the picture. And an extra layer to me that made the whole experience even more fun is the whole making it with your son all together. Was kind of a fun little evening experience.
It was really nice. Yeah,
that to me was kind of a great way to tie everything all at once in a fun way.
It really worked out. It was not a long exposure, but
no, that's a good question. I did not write it down, but my guess I think
because we were basically trying to get him to be still around the globe, and he would find interest in the globe for a moment, and then maybe be holding the controller for the globe.
Yeah. And the that camera also is fairly finicky. It's pretty hard to set the focus, and I was shooting wide open because the lights is as powerful as it is. It's actually fairly dim, and so my guess would have been maybe 1/30th, 1/50th of a second or somewhere around there. So it's not the worst, but it's not
in tight quarters too. In tight quarters in a hot room.
Yeah, handheld because obviously with a baby that keeps moving, tripod is not really a possibility. So it was kind of like trying to, and it's also very low to the ground.
I thought he did well. Yeah, he had a lot of fun chasing the ball around. Then he realized he could roll the ball of light, and was chasing the ball around the room.
Yeah, I think the windows was I think the first few minutes were kind of like the best opportunity where he was actually fairly attracted to the sphere and playfully enjoying playing with it, and then he kind of lost track of it a little bit.
He ran out of energy. It's like, it's nap time, guys. Yeah, I think it turned out great. It's really beautiful. It has that very rich grain to it that only a Polaroid could give. That was cool.
Yeah, it's 3000 ISO, so it definitely has a heavy grain, but it is, as you said, I do like that grain. I think it has something kind of unique to it.
So what kind of cameras do you have in your arsenal? Because just as a backstory, Theo and I met at DreamWorks. Funny story, actually. I just remember, I think you came initially with a group of other French artists. Was there a training week and then you went home and then came back?
Well, it's a bit of a long story, but we came to train. We were a bunch of French artists that got hired to eventually go help open a studio in India. At the time, DreamWorks was looking to open a new antenna in India, and I don't know how somehow a producer by the name of Joe Aguilar had in mind that hiring a bunch of kids out of school in France was a great idea to send to supervise in India, which was pretty random. So at first we got sent into the studio here in Los Angeles, actually in Glendale, to train on all the proprietary tool set and learn the pipeline, which was an amazing experience for me. Out of school was a dream come true, absolutely. And turned out that the studio for which we had been hired originally was actually not ready yet to receive artists. They were still kind of building the actual local, the actual place. So because of that, we got the opportunity to expand a little bit or stay in the US. So we went back to France just for a little while to kind of extend our visas, and then came back, but this time not in Los Angeles. This time we came back to Redwood City. We were staying in San Francisco. And this is where we met at PDI, which was an amazing studio that sadly since has shut down. But
I had this vivid memory of you guys with like decks upon decks of skateboards, like ready to go back through customs because the skateboards were so
cheap, so much cheaper
here,
so
much affordable here. Yeah,
yes,
that's great. It's a great memory. You and Max were pretty avid skateboarders,
yeah. Yeah, and I think there were a few other people that bought some longboard. I mean, it's a great sport. I think it definitely is a very creative sport. So I think a lot of people in animation kind of gravitate around this kind of
that makes sense.
Medium.
That makes sense. Yeah, we were talking about you and me and Max, and this is Max Malio, who also did a piece in the book. He'll be up in the podcast a bit later. And we just kind of forged a bond, I believe, through Hacky Sack first.
Yeah,
on our lunch breaks.
Yeah, that's quite possible. Yes, during the lunchtime.
Yeah, and then everybody kind of split up and went away. You guys you did end up going to India.
So originally the idea was more to produce more kind of TV-oriented content for DreamWorks. So
that was in the beginning of DreamWorks'
yes.
TV venture, yeah.
But TV in a sense where it was more kind of like holiday special, it's kind of like shorter content, like maybe 20 minutes long.
I remember those. It's like content. Madagascar and...
Yeah, I think maybe the first one we did was a special for Christmas for Madagascar called Mad Santa, and then we did one for Valentine's Day called Mad Valentine, and we did a few short stories for Shrek for Halloween, the Shrek horror story, the Scared Shrekless. That was pretty awesome. The great director Gary Truesdale was pretty awesome. And eventually the studio kind of like got its bearings oiled, and we started to be able to handle more and more. So eventually we had the opportunity to get some sequences on feature films as well that we were kind of sharing with both Pacific Data Images in Redwood City PDI and also the antenna of the studio here in Glendale.
So were you on Madagascar 2? Was that your first film?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was the first film at PDI.
I think we were gearing up for Megamind right when you guys were wrapping up Madagascar 2. Both amazing films. If you guys haven't seen them, go out and catch them. I just saw Megamind on... it's strange because now I'm starting new profiles for a kid on my streaming devices. So I think it's HBO.
Oh, you have the icon of
a little icon for Hawk, and Megamind was the first one that popped up, and the kids. I was like, oh, that's cool. Can't wait till he's old enough to tell him I was on that one.
What were you doing at the time on it?
I was a central production coordinator. I'm working for the great Denise Casino. Yeah, it was just an awesome experience. Everybody on that film was great. I think that started off as Gary as the director, and then they switched gears with Tom McGrath, and Tom came in with this like West Coast chopper approach to the artwork. I remember it was a little sci-fi at first, and I think Robert Downey Jr. was originally Megamind.
Wow.
Did you know that?
No.
And then they switched to Will Ferrell. That was awesome when Will came on, for sure.
Yeah, it's a movie that is a bit undervalued. I think it's a great movie, but I think
I always thought it would come out, and we'd see a Megamind too. I hope so.
Well, one day.
Especially with maybe they'll bring it down the pipeline, because it really is always in the feed everywhere. So that turned out amazing. That was great. And then I just kind of hit the eject button and decided I was going to go back to study directing. And at the... I gotta kill this mosquito. Mosquitoes freak me out. Speaking of mosquitoes, you should see Max Melio's Bats animation. That's pretty great. Yeah, I went back to study directing at the Academy of Art in San Francisco. The idea to write this book was definitely, it was always there, but it was really calling my name then. I started working on music out of Hyde Street Studios, and soon after that I just started taking detailed notes about the book. 2019 I started writing. The whole experience was pretty dear to me, just working in this particular studio that you're sitting in here, making it a cool space. Yeah, the rest is history. It's out now.
Yeah, had you written anything before this?
Short stories mainly, and some short screenplays, a lot of ideas. Yeah, I go big. When I go, I definitely go big. Yeah, other people had mentioned that as well. I won a little award when I was a kid for writing.
Okay.
And I think even then I knew it kind of came naturally. It's the one art form that feels good to me.
It's natural.
It's natural, and I feel like I have a good hold on storytelling.
Have you ever held a journal where you kind of... Yeah, you did?
Yeah, for sure. I've kept kind of detailed notes, and I've definitely kept like story beats for the book. And I knew as life was happening, I think at some point when all these things are happening, you're like, yeah, this is probably going to be a good story. So...
Did you go back and read your journals while you were writing the book to kind of refresh your mind as to your spirit of the moment? Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. And also, something amazing that happened while working on this, you're going to get to see how the human memory works. Like there might be a memory that you have that's very hazy, and as soon as you start to write it out, details start coming back. You know, it's all in there. But if you start to uncover it, it reveals itself slowly.
How far back did your journal go? When did you start writing as a kid?
As a kid, yeah, for sure.
And you still have them?
Probably 8 years old.
Wow. Okay.
Well, one journal is mentioned in the book that burned in a fire, and it was a pretty important journal to me because my sister had given it to me.
Oh,
But as I started digging, I think I was working at DreamWorks at the time, and I came back to help my father, and he busted out this box, and in the box were a lot of old journals and notes, and even this folder of all the love notes that I'd had with my first girlfriend in the second grade. You know,
That's cute.
Really, it was cute. Yeah, so it was weird because you're peering back into someone that is so far back in your past, it doesn't even. You're kind of looking at yourself like, really? Did I really feel that way as a child? And I think I uncovered the oldest memory that I have, which was eating wax off of a candle on my 3rd birthday cake. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Do you know what your earliest memory is?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think, interestingly enough, I think it might be a built memory because of some. I know my parents had somehow or someone filmed something. At the time, it was pretty rare, but I remember seeing some of this, so maybe it kind of like. I don't know if I remember it or if it's because I've seen it. Most likely it's because I've seen it, so now I think I remember it. But
yeah. So you mentioned your parents were filming. Did they shoot? Do you remember? Did they shoot on film or was that video?
Not really. It was a video, but I'm not sure where it was from. I don't think it was them that took it because I don't recall my parents having a video camera when I was a kid. They had the regular cameras. I remember watching slides, you know.
Yeah,
being a kid, which was awesome. Like in retrospect, I still enjoy them.
So where do you think your love for photography came from? When did you first want to pick up a camera?
That's a good question. I think since I was a kid, I always liked drawing, even though I've never been great at it. But I always enjoyed it, and I always liked images in general. You know, I think there is something kind of like just the fun of creating an image, and like the just, you know, nice images is something that kind of resonates with me. I think maybe towards after high school, I think, which is to a degree kind of rather late in my life. I mean, I did appreciate my parents' pictures, but I never really kind of saw it as an artistic medium until somewhere right after high school. I think that's when I started to get interested into understanding the mechanics of it, you know, the actual, the inner works of like, the lens and the aperture and, you know, and those f-stops and the focal length and all that. I was like, I'm interested into trying to understand what does all of those terms mean and see how to use that. So I did get my first camera. That was a pretty crappy camera. And then I remember going on a little trip with some friends, and one of my friends that is a great photographer was kind of like taking pictures, and I remember at the end of the trip looking at his pictures and really realizing, wow, that's amazing. Like it looked like we had done a different trip. We were on the same trip all along, but when you see it through his eye, it was like amazing. And that to me was kind of a little bit of a click as to like, okay, there is definitely much more than just like understanding it. Understanding is crucial, of course, the mechanics of it, but then it kind of like that was my doorway towards the more the looking. Now it's kind of the next step, and then I kind of build up from there. And I think my real nice first camera that I really kind of committed to and invested in and enjoyed for years was when I first met you, when I moved to San Francisco and starting in life with my first salary. I think the first thing that I bought was an actual nice, cheap at the time, I mean cheap, not the cheapest, but a nice decent DSLR camera.
Was that Nikon?
Yeah. And then that I carried with me all over the place for the years to follow. It took like thousands and thousands.
That's
of
why we have
pictures.
such great photographs of our time together. Yeah, you're one of, a lot of people have cameras. You're the only one I know that like carries a light meter around with you and getting a good light reading. during the photograph. That's great. Yeah, photography is a really surprisingly technically difficult to pull off photographs.
There's a technical component, and there is the tool itself. There is the lighting is another technical component, and then there is composition. There is all those things. But at the end of the day, it's just that there's so many aspects to it that I thoroughly enjoy. It's kind of has that magical thing of capturing a moment. It's sublime, the moment, in a way, because you you choose how and what to see and how you're gonna see it, and exactly what we were saying earlier of like, what was your earlier memory. There is something with photographs where it's kind of like to a degree cheat the memory, where you can a random example would be you're in a place filled with trash, but you take a nice little flower and you don't see any of the trash in the picture. Your memory of the place is going to be that one little flower, and you completely forget about everything else. And that's the one thing that you're going to remember about that place was that little flower. Right. Like, in years from now, when you think about that, you're not going to think about all that trash that was around. You're going to just see that one little thing. It's kind of like
right.
It's kind of an interesting way to really kind of narrow down your vision to that one little thing that you're interested in. The other thing also that I think is fascinating, to me, that the part that I enjoy the most is the hunt for the picture also.
Yes.
There is something of like that's something, it depends what kind of picture you're taking. Obviously, like sometimes it's something that is more kind of plan and build. That's a different art form altogether. But for me, I do appreciate like street photography or otherwise traveling photography, when you don't know what you're gonna encounter, and it's all about being on the hunt, like always looking around. It allows you to be very present in the moment and being hyper aware. You kind of keep looking around at what's going on, keep looking at the light, it's funny, like I think when I first started, I was more attracted by people. Was definitely the one thing that I was like, I was taking a lot of portraits, and not specifically by asking people. It was kind of like stolen portraits to a degree sometimes also, but really people was my main focus. But I think through the years I've started to kind of like change a little bit my attention. Lighting is definitely a thing that when you see a cool lighting set, then you kind of you have to move around to see if you can find a cool angle. It's like it's an adventure. That's the fun part of it. Is you're very present in a moment. You're looking around to see if you can build an image somewhere with something that has an interest to you, whatever it is. It's very subjective, so that's what it is. And then you hunt, and it leads you to places where you would have never gone if it wasn't for that little hunt for fun, where you're like, you end up discovering a place, meeting people, because you did those extra steps of trying to go somewhere to see what is there. Does it look better from there? And then at the end of the day, after all of that, you have that little one. Ideally, that's where I running back to the physical support. At the end of the day, if you manage to go all the way of the process and have an actual physical element that kind of encapsulates all those aspects of it, it's a very subjective memory. You're the one that kind of took it, so if anything, you're the one that has the biggest connection to this moment, and it's kind of sublime, where you only take it and show it whatever you want. And it's also all the history of how did you get there at the first place, of how did you end up at that moment taking that picture. And like the whiz and the cherry on top is the composition, the lighting, like the beauty of the image, and the moment itself. It's to me that there is all those elements that's why I fell in love with it years ago, and I still love it to this day.
It's a magical art form for sure. Whereas, I mean, we might be in 30, 60 frames a second in film. You get all of that time and information. Very similar art form, of course, but you have one image to tell the story in photography.
Yeah, I mean, motion then is another art form altogether. That's more kind of what I'm doing for work. Like it's similar concept. There is a bit less of it still has a lot of the component, and then you add the component of the motion that carries another. It's a full different vessel, but it's very interesting too. But it's definitely, obviously, a bit less spontaneous. Like working in CG, you don't have the capturing the moment has a different meaning to a degree. But
Yeah. it's a little bit more mechanical. Yeah, and everyone is kind of working on one shot for years at a time.
Yeah, it's a slower process. It's a much more deliberate and a lot of thoughts go into it. Everything is very controlled, so it's very enjoyable too. But it is definitely a different aspect.
Have you had any shots or sequences cut from the film that you're working on?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, this is part of.
How does that feel?
It's part of the job. I think to me, we always try to tell the story in the best way we can, and the reality of it is when you start to put everything together in editorial, sometimes you realize that some of the things that you thought you needed, you might not need, and it makes the storytelling better because it's a bit more efficient. So it's part of the process, and I respect that. It all comes down to, does it make it better or not, and that's a subjective thing, at the end of the day. So, but most of the time, I mean, I do agree that it does improve. It depends. That the question is more like, was there any sequence that got removed where I really thought it was adding something extra to the movie that we lost?
Well, more like, did you have an emotional attachment to a shot that you had worked on? Because it's a long time to work on something. Were you ever a little bummed that not for the benefit of the story, but because, I really love that shot that I worked on?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, that's, to me, that's kind of the curse of being an artist in this kind of industry. It is a business. At the end of the day, you have to make a movie, and ideally for profit. So you kind of have to answer to higher grounds, which is part of the game. But at the same time, part of your job is you want to be involved in your work. You have to commit, despite the fact that it potentially might end up being cut. So you have to
care about your thing. And I think that's kind of the editing room in general, right? Well, there's a quote over here I always love to use, which is, be prepared to sacrifice great pieces of writing and near perfect words, parts of yourself that you bled to get on the page. And that's kind of the editing room, right? It's like, I remember the first films that I was making, every shot, I wanted every frame. And it's like, to cut even just half a second. These were terrible shots. Something I shot that the first time I had picked up a camera and really didn't even know how to use one. I think I didn't get a good grade on the first one because I couldn't get it under 3 minutes, because I really
you want to keep everything.
Shot, I thought this professor's going to understand because this is such a beautiful shot. So it was a wake-up call. I think there was this, like a learning curve, I guess. It's a learning curve of realizing what it is to have to cut seconds off of something that...
Yeah, it's also, I think it's definitely learning to take a step back and not staying focused on the details. Because yes, it might be your favorite shot that you absolutely love, but if you take a step back, you realize that, because it's dragging too long, and all of a sudden it kind of kills a little bit the rhythm of the moment, and at the end of the day, you're deteriorating the final output, the final product, the final piece that you're creating, where because of your passion for that little piece, it might actually deteriorate the final big piece. So it is a learning curve as to, like, okay, let me step back now, and that's where you weigh how much. Sure.
And in DreamWorks' case, the audience matters a lot, right?
Yeah,
so children are watching a lot of films, and there's a whole rhythm of making a children's film versus maybe like a David Lynch film or something to that effect.
Yeah, we have a very different pace for sure.
Very different pace. I've been watching a lot of the David Lynch just kind of behind the scenes videos that have surfaced since he passed away, and seeing him as a director, and it's so fun to watch his passion on the set. He's so passionate, even if it's just the curtains. Those curtains are so beautiful in the middle of a conversation. So let's see, where were we? Kind of talking about photography.
I mean, we met in San Francisco. I think at the time, I remember you were also very creative between music and paintings. I think also that's one of the things that we kind of connected. Like, you had that friend Zach, I think if I recall, that had an amazing kind of loft with all those artwork and all those amazing paintings. That he had some little exhibition. That's another kind of thing that, as an artist, I think is always great, is to feed your mind with And I think that's kind of how we all kind of connected with Max as well, like all that creative fertilizer.
Yeah, it really was. That we were all kind of sitting around, and there were guitars and
music and art and paintings, and
everybody doing everything at the same time.
It was a great era.
It was a really great era. I'm going to try to get Carlos on the show too, and Carlos and Ronnie were making really
awesome music.
As they do.
And also movies.
Those two are advanced. Yeah. We call those guys advanced. And I just remember, I think I had just a normal DJ mixing console. I asked them to come over and play music one night, and they just brought a makeshift board of panels and all kinds of things that they're kind of like rocket scientists, whatever they do, you know, and busted out this set that was so mind-blowing. And we got to see a lot of that, just a small room of 10 to 15 people that got to see some pretty amazing things happening there.
Yeah, and I think after that, so for us, we stayed in San Francisco for like half a year or so. And eventually for me, I moved to India, and you went to CalArts, to Academy of Arts, you were saying?
Yep.
But eventually, fast forward a few years later, for me, I came back to San Francisco and came back to PDI after the Indian experience. And that's where we kind of reconnected at the time with a song also, my spouse.
Yeah, a song.
Yeah, we had a fun times. And then, I'm not sure exactly about the timeline, but I think we reconnected briefly, but then maybe kind of lost sight of each other for a little bit until we realized we both had moved to LA, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Which year did you
There was a few
here?
of those moments in LA where I was like, oh yeah, so-and-so is here. Oh, so-and-so is here. I think I talked to Max, and Max reminded me that you were here. Yeah, we're always trying to drag Max back to LA. Yeah, Max went back to France, and he's had a great career over there. And do you ever make it back to France?
Yeah, once in a while, you know, my family is still there, so I try to go when I can. I mean, I would say every other year, basically average.
What was that like coming to America from the south of France?
Well, it was definitely a very interesting experience. I mean, I mentioned it briefly, but for me, coming out of school and getting a chance to work for DreamWorks was...
So I was thinking it must have been a dream come true.
It was insane. Yeah, for me, it was like, there's not in my wildest dream any of this would have happened. And we got so lucky where it never happened before, it never happened after, that they did a big batch of hiring people out of school like this. Was the only year it happened, and it happened to be the year where I finished and graduated, so it was extremely lucky. So coming here was kind of like dreaming awake.
It was a waking dream for sure.
It's kind of crazy.
Well, it's been a joy watching you and Carlos and the people who are working so hard there. The films are getting better and better, and you guys have been kind of climbing up the ranks. So you started as a TD? No, you started as...
I started as an artist, first for Final Layout, which is kind of like one of the branch of cinematography. It's Final Layout is very specifically, it has kind of three aspects. There is a technical aspect where it is kind of the central hub for all the production departments, where we kind of prep the scene for everybody. And then we are also in charge of set dressing, which is a very interesting... meticulous skill set that is very kind of composition oriented, and set dressing is really more about, you know, composition within the details. Like for example, I remember one of my first tasks on Madagascar when I had to set dress an entire forest in Africa with those crazy fig trees and vines and ferns, and
nice.
And it's kind of great where you have a frame that you're trying to compose for, and at the same time you want to, I mean, at least that's the way I was approaching it, you try to make yourself some stories of like the life that, you know, creating
Backstory.
those paths. Yeah, exactly. Like even though it's plants, you know, it's just like trying to make sure that it looks organic. You know, you don't want it to feel like, you don't want to feel any generic patterns, and you want it to have some kind of those nice qualities of making it composed nicely, but at the same time feeling natural, you know, it not forced. So that it was a lot of fun, like, and I definitely enjoyed that part. And then the final aspect of of the artist job for final layout is you're in charge of all the camera polishing.
Okay.
So at the very end, it's a long process, animation. There is many steps. But at the very end, once animation has done their work, there is a team, the final layout, that comes and does the ultimate final little retouch to the camera animation so that the shot is really polished, basically. So that was a lot of fun. That's kind of what I ended up doing in India for a few years. But then eventually, for me, after a few years, I started to kind of get... at first, I was a little bit torn between... I always loved animation also, just animating characters. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I was kind of inspiring to eventually maybe do a little bit. And I got extremely lucky. I got a chance to kind of train in the animation department at DreamWorks, and I got a chance to animate a few shots on some of those little holiday special. And as much as it was super fun, and I'm glad I had the opportunity, it also kind of like highlighted a little bit how tedious it is. I really enjoyed the animation part, but there is a significant part of the animation is a lot of the polishing of the animation itself. The same way that we polish the camera, we also polish the character animation. And this is... Mm-hmm. This at that level, because obviously the level of animation, it was way beyond what I was able to do out of school. So it was definitely a steep learning curve to try to get to that level. And the polishing was very, very time consuming. And to me, it kind of just opened a little bit my eyes to, I really like the blocking phase. I like things going fast. The polishing part is kind of a little tricky, but it happened that there is another department called rough layout, mm-hmm. where also called pre-visualization. There is several names for it, mm-hmm. where you just do a very rough pass of the animation, and then you do the mise en scène that you were saying. Like that's where you kind of create the shot and the flow between shots and the camera move, and that's where you pick your lens. So to me, all of a sudden, it was like, oh wait a second, there is a medium in which I can mix all the things that I love. I can animate at the same time. I can play with my lensing, and I can animate the camera, and you do a little bit of everything. It's a very kind of a generalist type of role. I often describe it as you do a blueprint for the movie in a very rough fashion. So you represent a little bit every aspect of it. So you're gonna have some rough animation, you're gonna have some rough effects, some rough lighting, some rough surfacing, like look dev, like everything is being represented in a crude way, but at least all the intentions are very clear. And because it's very crude, it's very easy to iterate and fast to iterate. Mm-hmm. So from a director's point of view, if I put myself in their shoes, for them this is a very fertile ground where you can experiment, and you have a very quick turnaround that allows you to test and see how you can tell your story in the best way possible, without having to waste the full power of having 30 people working on that sequence. It's just one person or two that can do the entire sequence and iterate very quickly. So I started to get really interested into that area, which eventually I got super lucky to have amazing mentors, by the way, like Conan Lowe, which at the time was head of layout at PDI, that mentored me for all the time I was in India. So eventually it kind of gave me an opportunity to work a little bit in rough layout on one of the holiday special. I think I did a couple shots for some of the Shrek Halloween.
Oh, I love that one.
Which was just a few shots here and there, like a small tiny piece of sequences, which was awesome. I was so excited to have a chance, of course. And then eventually after that I got another chance to do a couple sequences on a Puss in Boots short, Los Tres Diablos,
Puss,
directed by Raman Hui, which was also a great little experience. And the more I was gravitating toward that area, the more I was like, okay, this is definitely what I want to do. Hence, unfortunately, they did not have rough layout in India at the time. Eventually, even till the end, they never really had a rough layout department in India. So hence, I got lucky enough to fight my way back to the US to be able to join the rough layout department at PDI. And then, since I think at the time was for the first feature I got to work on was Peabody and Sherman, Mr. Peabody and Sherman, and then Penguins, and anyway, from there moved on. But
yeah, so I could kind of bring it back to
how did you land at DreamWorks? What was your journey?
Yeah, that was a hustle. Well, I went to the Savannah College of Art and Design to study production, And I knew I was coming to California. Originally it was going to be LA, but then I went to San Francisco with a friend and fell in love with San Francisco immediately.
Such a great town.
Yeah,
great
it really is. And so I started looking for work there. And I knew of the major studios. I knew I wanted to land somewhere. But I landed a spot at a small production company. And I worked there for a few years, and Ken Bielenberg worked there. And so when we finished work there, he put my name in a hat. And so I started in facilities working in the mailroom. And then, as the story goes, I should have Laura Montero to tell the rest of the story, actually. Laura, definitely a favorite in the building. And so she put my name in another hat. Let's put it that way. And I ended up on Megamind working with Denise Casino. And yeah.
All great people.
That's what I wanted to say about the building. It's like something I missed immediately upon leaving. Was it's just such a wonderful place to work. Like, not just that you get to work on these amazing films, but the people there really are all the people, you know. There's
that's true. The vibe, the PDI vibe was so unique.
Mm-hmm.
The family,
it was a
family, definitely. It was such a nice environment.
And I think I started working on the day before Thanksgiving. And facilities used to organize all these great parties for the whole building. And this one in particular was putt-putt golf. And all the departments designed their own putt-putt hole. And I just remember walking in and being like,
what's going on?
Working? Did any of you work? What are you guys doing? So, yeah, a very cherished experience to work there. In rough layout, it seems like it's such a vital department. You know, to be able to test everything out so that everything moves smoothly. I mean,
it kind of circled back to the blueprint idea that I had mentioned earlier. It is, the more precise your blueprint, the easier it is to build after. Like, if you have everything already kind of laid down on paper very clearly and all the intentions are there, then it's just a matter of, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then people can assess and plan and estimate the amount of work with a very precise intel, as opposed to, I think, in the old days when the tool set was not as flexible and easy as it is today, things were obviously still going through, but there was much more room for interpretation, which inherently is just a bit more time consuming and takes more time, because your iteration happen at a level of detail. It's very similar to sculpting. Like, you want to first do a gross pass on your sculpture, and you want to make sure you're happy with the overall. Not that I'm a sculptor, but at least conceptually,
yeah.
You want to make sure that you have the rough overall shape before starting to carve the details. If the first thing you do is to start with the tiny details, you're kind of facing the chance of potentially at some point realizing, you're off scale, off balance, and now you have to do a significant amount of work to kind of catch up and change things, if you can at all. So the more precise your rough estimate is, but without going too far into the detail, the better everybody else is going to be down the line. So it's definitely a key, crucial point for production. Yeah,
that's something I really love about it. The animation process is a lot of work goes into every shot, because if it, like you said, if it goes wrong later, it's an issue, which I think is similar to both photography and the particular photography that you did in the book, you know, with the Polaroid. I find there's so much more focus that goes in when you only have a certain amount of film to shoot on, versus these days we have...
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Yes, the digital video, approach. That's an interesting thing, of course. I started with digital, my photography kind of journey, but then eventually kind of shifted to film. And as you were saying, there is something very interesting about the intention that goes with, because of the limitation. And I think, to be fair, I think this is true in all art form. Having some constraints can be a motivating factor, can be an engine, a fertile ground to help you find interesting ideas because of the limitation. And I think I did, but back a couple of years ago, a small digital camera. Just definitely it is a hassle, the film. It has a cost, first off. It's super expensive nowadays. it takes time. It's like
Processing and the color correction.
And you might miss some shot, but at the same time, because you're so much more intentional, at least for me, it's much more enjoyable. Like my little digital camera, it's a great, really nice small camera, very cheap, super capable. But it's not the same. It's not the same feeling, like to a degree, because it's almost too easy. I know it's a bit weird to say, but it's so easy that then you lose a little bit of the intentionality into it, and
soulless, not soulless, but
it's very subjective. So that being said, I remember thoroughly enjoying shooting digital originally. It's just since I've kind of like moved away, but I'm not saying that it's not gonna come back eventually. I think it's just for me at the time right now, like the losing that little edge kind of like pulls me out of a bit of the process versus having to be extra aware. But
when you were coming to shoot the photo for the book, I thought you were coming digital. I thought you were going to bring a digital piece. So then when you busted out the Polaroid, I wonder how much film he has in there. So we only have. So it really did add that dramatic tension, is what you can refer to it as you're shooting, that exists. And I think you nailed it. It really came out perfect.
My goal is for you to be happy. That's what matters.
Yeah, you have succeeded. So I want to thank you for coming and talking to me, and thank you for doing the piece.
Of course.
I know you're very busy in doing it, and it was a really special experience.
Well, thanks for offering me to be part of it. It was a fun experience that we got to share. It was great.
Cool. I'm gonna go now. Eclipse of the Mourning Star is available at eclipseofthemorningstar.com or eotms.com. Also available at every other bookstore online.